Have you ever been relaxing in bed and smelt something burning and thought to yourself, oh, there is no way that's good news? Well, that's exactly what happened to me about 6 months ago. It was this pillow, Exhibit A, which had fallen off the bed onto Exhibit B, this Woodburner flue, which comes up from the living room, through the master bedroom and into the loft. At this point, you're probably asking yourself, hey, that seems like a fire hazard. Shouldn't that be boxed in? Well, my friend, you ask great questions. So whilst I work out how to fix this, let me tell you a little story. In 2018, I hired a company to come and install my Woodburner. Let's call them Cowboy Stoves. The company were HETAS accredited. That's important for later, but if you don't know, HETAS are a certification body that makes sure the person working on your Woodburner is competent and that it's installed to building regs. So they've been at my house for about half an hour and I get a call at work to tell me they've drilled through into the next door neighbour's house. These neighbours had moved in the week before. I hadn't even met them yet. Oh, this is as far as I got today. Don't forget to keep your eyes peeled for the next part of the story. It's wild. So I get home that night and I knock on my neighbour's house and I say, hey, I know we've not met yet, but I'm the one who's drilled through your wall. They told me they'd been sat on the sofa and had seen 2 screws magically appear from nowhere and they thought, were they there before? They were really sweet about it and I'm sure the bottle of wine that I brought around helped too. But that wasn't the only surprise for me when I got home. I left Cowboy Stoves with strict instructions not to cut through any joists and they reassured me that they wouldn't have to. I think you can guess where this is going. They'd taken a 2-inch chunk out of one of the joists to force it to fit. So here's the thing, when it's integral to the structure, you can't just slice bits out like a cake. You can't just scoop bits out like a creme brulee. So needless to say, I was pissed. And there's more on that later because amazingly it gets worse. Anyway, back to my neighbours. The house next door was actually rented, so they needed to get in contact with the estate agents to arrange to go in and fix the damage. And so Cowboy Stove said, hey, pay us in full and we'll come back and fix it next week. And so I'm like, you cheeky little monkey. No, we're not doing that. I'm still building this, so tune in for the next part. The phone rings and it's the estate agent. At this point, me and Greenwoods are proper besties. We'd been chatting on the regular because this was the 3rd time that Cowboy Stoves had lied about doing the work so they could get paid. But that wasn't their only hurdle. They had a huge snagging list they had to get through before the job was finished. They needed to install a carbon monoxide alarm before it could be signed off, replace a paintbrush that they'd stolen, remove forgotten tools and waste, fix a cable they'd broken, fix a hole they'd made in my ceiling that they'd tried to hide with a spray can full of white paint. I guess they hoped I wouldn't notice the 2-inch patch of glossy paint on the matte ceiling gleaming with the brightness of 1,000 suns. There was more, but you get the gist. It was 2 weeks before they realised they'd met their match, they did the work, and then I paid them. I left an honest review on Trustpilot and invited people to make up their own minds about whether they wanted to work with this company based on my experience. I thought that's the last I would see of them. But little did I know that things were about to get even more interesting. When 3 years later, I find something really unexpected in the loft. One night, about 6 months ago, I was awakened to the sound of dripping coming from my loft. So I thought I'd investigate. I discovered a broken tile where my Woodburner had been installed. The batten supporting the tile had been removed, which is why it eventually cracked and started to leak. So I guess that explains the drip, but that wasn't the worst thing I saw. Cowboy Stoves removed this beam to fit the Woodburner, which isn't a problem as long as it's properly supported, which it wasn't, but that also wasn't the worst thing. The beam they'd removed was one that the chimney stack had been resting on, and that was a problem, especially when you learn that this chimney stack sits just here, right above my head. I got that problem addressed right away, even though the loft is such a tight squeeze. But it did make me wonder if they were willing to do work that was so unsafe that even a layman could tell. What else could be wrong with it? Shortly before the dripping incident, a pillow had fallen against it and almost caught on fire. I decided to make a complaint to HETAS. If something was wrong, Cowboy Stoves would be obliged to come back and repair it. I was curious if anyone else had had problems with them. With trepidation, I put their name into Google and pressed search. I remember the day I learned, if you don't want to know something, don't Google it. In the 3 years since I'd left my bad review for Cowboy Stoves, another 17 had appeared. And the reason they were all red is because they are spicy. But here's the hottest tea. I had a follower DM me a few days ago because they could tell they'd had the same company and I've never even mentioned their name. Imagine producing a standard of work so bad that it causes strangers to bond over it. Anyway, let's go back to the Google search. I'd now realised this wasn't a one-off. So I lodged a formal complaint and HETAS told them, you've got to go and fix that. The person who'd actually installed my Woodburner was no longer at the company. The company was now just the owner. I was told he'd been taking great strides to repair the work of the former installer. So I thought I'd give them the benefit of the doubt. And if you're currently screaming at your phone for me not to, you're very wise. We played cat and mouse for a number of months where he would pretend that he'd come over but no one was in. HETAS told him, you have to fix this. And I told him, I'll take you to court if you don't. So finally he arranged a time. An hour before he was due, he sent me a text with a photo attached. attached. And the guy sends me a text to say that he's been in a serious car accident and forwarded a photo of a white van with a ding in the side. But we all know the fable of the boy who cried wolf. To be fair, he probably did get whiplash trying to dodge his problems. He said he'd let me know when he was fit enough to come round, but as you can imagine, he never did. We all know who the villain is in this story, but we've not talked about the heroes. It was now coming into winter and I wanted to start using my wood burner. I sent an appeal to the 700,000 of you that follow DIY with Emma for recommendations of people you trust, and you helped me find them. I had 2 independent heat-ass engineers come round to review my wood burner and tell me what needed to be done to get it up to regulations, including making sure there was sufficient clearance to any plasterboard or combustibles. They told me what materials I should use, that it needed an inspection hatch, and they helped me make some other minor adjustments. Cowboy Stoves got away without making reparations, and all I could do was email Heatas to tell them. I figured that would be the end of it, but that was before I got their reply. My phone pings to tell me that I have a new email. I can see it's from Heatas. After nearly 4 years of dealing with Cowboy Stoves, I was excited to finally put this saga behind me, but I couldn't shift the feeling of disappointment that they'd gotten away without repairing their bad work. I'd left them a bad review on Trustpilot and I'd reported them to Heatas, and that was really all I could do. I took a big sigh and I opened the email. They told me they were pleased that the works had been completed, but were naturally disappointed that it had come at my own expense. And I agree with this sentiment. After all, the wood burner being safe is what matters to me the most. But it's what they said next that caught my attention. Cowboy Stoves had their registration with Heatas revoked. Heatas had built a sufficient enough evidence base that they were able to do this. Ugh, I do love a happy ending. This doesn't mean that Cowboy Stoves can't continue to install wood burners, but it does mean that they no longer have the seal of approval from Heatas. So raising a complaint worked. I'd helped to have this registration revoked, and I could put this behind me. I filed my emails for safekeeping, and in doing so, I found an email from 2019 I'd completely forgotten about. My emails were ready for filing, and amongst them I'd discovered that I'd sent an email to Heatas in 2019, completely forgotten that I'd emailed them before. The wood burner had been signed off without a hearth, and whenever I used it I could smell burning, and because of this Heatas invited me to fill in a complaints form. But after a bit of googling I realised it was quite easy to fix. And fun fact, the video of me installing this was my 7th ever DIY video. But finding this email did get me thinking, what if I had have submitted a complaint in 2019? But we can't make decisions in hindsight. We can only make the best choice we can with the information we have at the time. In this case, I was just unlucky, and I don't want my experience to put you off from using trades. We're not an island, and sometimes we need help. We might not have the skills yet. It might be something that needs to be certified. Or it might just be a job that we don't want to do. I'm looking at you, wallpaper stripping. One of the best ways to lower the risk is to have a recommendation from a friend. Read online reviews and rely upon word of mouth. If you're having a wood burner installed and you want to avoid this company, drop me a DM. And if you enjoyed this series, don't forget to follow for the next one.